Welcome to our deep dive. We're looking at some really interesting new data you've shared with us today. It's about semaglutide. You might know it, as Wegovy often talked about for weight loss. But what we're doing today is a bit different. We're going to unpack some, frankly, surprising findings from a new analysis of the SELECT trial. This was presented recently at the European Congress on Obesity. And we're focusing specifically on the early stuff, the cardiovascular benefits that seem to pop up really quickly. You've given us some article excerpts, and honestly, there are some unexpected insights here. They kind of challenge what we thought we knew.
Absolutely. I mean, we already knew about the longer-term heart benefits from the main SELECT trial results. That was,
Yeah.
established. But this new analysis, it really zooms in on what's happening almost right after someone starts the medication and the timing. So that's a fascinating part.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The headline finding reported in your source: semaglutide seems linked to a pretty significant drop in major adverse cardiovascular events, MCEs, as they call them. And this happens within just, what, 6 months of starting?
That's the core finding, yeah. And it's a big one. The data showed a 41% reduction in the risk for these MACs just in that first 6-month window compared to placebo. The hazard ratio, if you want the stat, was 0.59 for those first 6 months. But what's really striking, like the source points out, isn't just the number, it's the speed, how
Yep.
fast this happens.
Right, and here's where it gets, well, really interesting for me, and maybe a bit counterintuitive. Your sources are really emphasizing that this benefit shows up way before patients lost a lot of weight, or even before they hit the full target dose of the drug, which I think was 2.4 milligram weekly, and that took like 16 weeks to ramp up to.
Exactly. So the heart protection seems to kick in before the big weight changes. In fact, the hazard ratio for MACs was already looking better than placebo below 1, even in the first 3 months. It came in at 0.63 then. And Dr. Donna Ryan, one of the presenters quoted, apparently said the risk was lower on semaglutide than placebo almost immediately. The article even mentions the first statistically significant reduction was seen by day 20. Day 20. And it was sustained by day 86.
Wow, day 20. Okay, that really drives home the almost immediately idea. So we know when it happens quickly. Let's dig into what specific events were actually reduced in those crucial first 6 months. What did the sources say?
Okay, so in that first 6-month period, you had 67 MACEs in the semaglutide group versus 113 in the placebo group. And breaking that down, the article highlights a pretty dramatic 53% drop in cardiovascular deaths. That was 14 deaths versus 30. There was also a solid 43% reduction in non-fatal heart attacks, myocardial infarction. Although, interestingly, the reduction in non-fatal stroke wasn't statistically significant in that very early phase. The hazard ratio there was 0.87.
Okay. That breakdown is really telling, especially the CV death reduction so early on. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe let's step back for a sec. Who exactly was in this study? Context matters, right?
Oh, absolutely. So the SELECT trial, it was big. Over 17,600 people, they were 45 or older, had overweight or obesity, so a BMI of 27 or more, and they already had established cardiovascular disease, meaning, history of heart attack or stroke or symptomatic peripheral artery disease.
Yeah.
But importantly, they did not have type 2 diabetes. That's key, though the source does mention about 2/3 had prediabetes. And they were already getting standard treatments, things like statins, blood pressure meds.
Right. So these were already high-risk individuals getting the usual care. And adding semaglutide still showed this early benefit on top. What did the researchers like Dr. Ryan say about their thinking when they first designed the trial? Was this expected?
Well, Dr. Ryan is quoted emphasizing that they didn't primarily think of it as just a weight loss study from the get-go, even though obviously weight loss was anticipated. She said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, "We thought the drug itself might have properties beneficial to cardiovascular outcomes apart from weight loss." And it really seems like this early data strongly backs up that original hypothesis.
Yeah, it really does. Which brings us back to that central surprise, that benefit arriving before the major weight loss. How did the investigators actually check that connection, or maybe the lack of connection, in the source you shared?
Right, so the article explains they specifically looked at whether the weight loss they did see early on could explain this cardiovascular benefit. They basically compared the day-by-day risk reduction for MACEs against the average weight change over time. And the key finding they highlighted was what they called a dissociation between the two curves. So put simply, the line showing heart risk going down dropped much faster and earlier than the line showing significant weight loss. That strongly suggests the early CV benefit is happening, well, independently of weight changes.
And just to give everyone a sense of how little weight had been lost when these benefits were already showing up, Your sources mentioned that by week 4, the weight difference between the groups was only about, what, minus 1.1%?
Yeah, tiny.
And by week 12, it was minus 3.6%. So maybe a few pounds difference. While seeing these big drops in serious events like CV death, it really underlines that dissociation you mentioned.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
So, okay, if it's not mainly the weight loss driving this quick early benefit, what else could be going on? The sources brought in commentary from Dr. Jason Halford. He apparently found the results surprising for exactly that reason, because they seem to disconnect the benefit from weight loss, at least initially. He speculates there has to be some other mechanism underpinning it.
Did the source give any clues about what that other mechanism might be? Any leading theories?
Dr. Halford specifically mentioned a possible reduction in inflammation. He points out, that obesity itself is considered an inflammatory condition, and these GLP-1 drugs like semaglutide, they do more than just affect appetite and blood sugar. They have wider effects. Now, the source doesn't claim this is proven fact, but inflammation reduction is definitely presented as a strong possibility for this rapid, non-weight loss-related effect.
Okay, inflammation. That makes some sense. So, if this early protection is real and maybe tied to inflammation, what does this actually mean for you, the listener, or for doctors making treatment decisions? What are the implications highlighted?
Well, Dr. Halford suggests these findings could really influence early treatment choices.
Mm.
For patients who have both obesity and known heart disease, seeing this quick benefit might mean considering semaglutide sooner rather than later, maybe not waiting for significant weight loss first. He also brings up a really interesting point about how this fits with existing heart treatments.
Mm.
Like, if one drug can tackle obesity and offer this kind of rapid protection against heart attacks and death, could it sometimes be preferred or maybe used strategically alongside current standard therapies?
That's a pretty big question for the medical field.
It is. And the article notes, as more anti-obesity drugs come out, we should probably compare them not just on long-term weight loss, but also on these crucial cardiovascular outcomes, especially the early ones. Dr. Halford basically wraps up saying these early results shift the narrative. We knew about the long-term protection, but the speed and the apparent separation from weight loss. That was the unexpected part from this new analysis.
Right. So pulling it all together from this deep dive into your sources, it looks like semaglutide starts protecting against major heart problems remarkably fast, like within weeks. And crucially, this early shield seems to be working separately from its more famous and slower effect on body weight.
Yeah, exactly. And this rapid effect, seemingly not just about weight loss, it really does open up some big questions, doesn't it? Like, if inflammation is a key part of this, as speculated, and we know obesity fuels inflammation, how might future research really nail down that connection? And maybe more intriguingly for you listening, could understanding that mechanism potentially lead to other ways to get rapid heart benefits, maybe even for people without significant weight issues?
Definitely a lot to think about as you continue exploring this whole area. We hope this deep dive into the data you shared has given you a clearer picture of these quite surprising early findings from the SELECT trial analysis.